Next up, we're going to look at daily aggregates, 3-hour blocks, and sessions. And the best way to explain it is just go to the statistic dashboard. So right here, what we have been looking at is every individual hour and the probabilities that each hour puts in a P1 or a P2. Now, what we can also do is that we can look at more clustered groupings of these percentages and these data points. So what you have here is these two arrows. This one's disabled because you're on the lowest granularity, because we're not going to go lower than looking at hours in a day. It's already 24 data points for one day. That's or 24 different rows. It's already quite a bit. But we can go up. So if we click here, what happens is that you see we reach, now it says 3 hour. We're still on the daily time frame, but now things are divided within 3-hour blocks. What does that mean? It's very simple. All of this is exactly the same. This is also exactly the same as the previous pages and all the things we have been discussing. The only difference is that the data is split up the day is split up in 3-hour blocks. So basically you were looking at here. Check. Here you're looking at 1-hour candles. So you divide the day in 1-hour candles, and here you are dividing the day into 3-hour candles. 3-hour candles. So to display that visually, this is the daily open, this is the next daily open or the daily close, and then you can see that each of these represent one 3-hour block. So since it's 3 hours, obviously we have 8 3-hour blocks in one day. We have 8 3-hour candles in one day. 8 times 3 is 24. So this is the first 3-hour block. This is the second 3-hour block. This is the third 3-hour block, and so on and so on. And as you can see, this is 48.3%, which is nothing more than the same as 28.3 plus 11.5 plus 8.5. It's just these three counting together. Now, the reason that's useful is that sometimes it makes sense to just look at a more aggregated view. I like to look at it this way because you have to realize that the markets don't distinguish in hours. So even though it is very useful to look at single hours, as we have seen, sometimes it also just makes sense to look at it in blocks of 3 hours. And that's what you see we are doing in the 4 hours. So for example, you can see that it's a very high probability of being in the first 3 hours of the day to be put in P1. And we can do the same here as what we did in the last one, with also the P1 change, last P1. So we can press this one to see how it has been changing. So this one has also been happening less. The first 3 hours have been putting in less P1s, first 2 hours here, now, and so on and so on. You can just press any one of them. And you can see that the last 3 hours have been putting in more and more P2s. So that is just the very basic of it. And how we can enter P1 and P2 is very simple. So right now we have our indicator on, and we have hour 7 and hour 14 as P1 and P2. So I'll put hour 7 here and hour 14 right here. Then it will auto calculate which 3-hour blocks that is in. So hour 7 is in the third 3-hour block, and hour 14 is in the fifth 3-hour block. And then we can see that it automatically puts it at the right row. And then we can also use time adjusted. So if we use time adjusted, we will see that right now, actually the current P2, this one, has a higher likelihood of becoming P1 than the current P1 does. So this actually says daily P1, but should be daily P2. It's a small bug that will be fixed. But what it's saying is that this one has, this 3-hour block is what it's saying. This 3-hour block has less chance of being the high than this 3-hour block. So it's just another way of looking at it. You're looking at a more aggregated view of things. And it also makes sense to look at it that way. If you look at these probabilities, you can see, if we don't put time adjusted, that these here have kind of like a group These have a group one. This is the same group pretty much, but then these three also have a group. These three have a group. So you can see that it's kind of, even if you look at here, it kind of looks like there is clusters of three. So what you're basically doing with the 3-hour data is that you're looking here as in what you're saying is, well, I'm not looking at individual hours. I just want to see if a P1 gets put in this zone. So you're just looking on a higher time frame. Multi-time frame statistical analysis. Then you can go one more up, and what you're looking at then is the sessions. So we have the Asia session, the London session, and the New York session. I want to say that this one doesn't work on the sessions table simply because it doesn't make a lot of sense to put in time adjusted mode on the session because there's only 4. With interesting data, you can see, for example, that London barely puts in a P1 or a P2. So we always say that London is not really your go-to session for a pivot. And well, this is the same thing as all the other pages, but now you're just looking at an even higher aggregation where you're looking per pivot. So we can see that New York is very important. And here you can see the progression, and that's taken off again. New York is starting to become even more important. We see that lately. Again, you can use different time frames here. I usually have it on 35, but play around with it. And one more thing here is that if you hover over this, you can see the session times. You probably won't see it because I have a pretty, the resolution I think is pretty, the letters are pretty small. But here it says Asia session from 0 to 8, London session from 8 till 2:30, New York session from 2:30 till 9, and post session from 9 till 12. And this is in time zone UTC plus 0. Time zone UTC plus 0. So keep that in mind. And that's all for the aggregated session. So again, it's just a more aggregated view of looking at the day, and I use it interchangeably, but be creative with it. But that's the gist of it. You're just looking at the same data, just on a more aggregated level.